Hello everyone, it's me, the Grim Reader, Kathy Grimm, here with another live/reading update, and I will just dump it all in together, although there is a part of me that thinks part of the live update stuff it's almost its own video, so I might do another one separately. But I'm just going to treat this one as a regular reading update. It's an unusual day for me to be updating Saturday, but we have had spring break, and so for me that meant until Wednesday midday I was really working very hard to read the students' midterm essays and grade them according to a rubric that I devised in a workshop some years ago. Thank goodness. The rubric is really helpful because it kind of you can just kind of go to the rubric to assess the points that they should get for their and most of them were fine. Anyway, that was done on Wednesday. And since then, I thought I would have we want to making a lot of videos, but it's been a little bit more like I want to just read and enjoy the days off, the few days off that I have. And I even thought I'd maybe get a tiny bit of work done, which I have gotten a tiny bit of prep done, but most of it will be tomorrow, Sunday, for Monday's classes again. It goes back into teaching on Monday, April 1st. And then until the end of the first week of May we teach, and I'll be glad when it's over. And the thing is, this happens to me every academic year. The spring semester is just rough because you're tired from the previous one, and of course this time I had the trip and everything. So yeah, I'm just tired, but everything will be fine. And let's see. One big thing that's happening in our neck of the woods, specifically our neck of the woods and some other towns in Ohio, is that on the 8th of April, we have the eclipse. And we're going to be apparently in total darkness for about 3 minutes. Not quite, like 250. So we don't have some places have 4 minutes of darkness. We'll have a good 2.5, if not almost 3 minutes of complete darkness. And so it will get darker, and then it'll be really dark at about 3, I guess, and then it will get light again. So it'll be kind of fun. There's all kinds of events that I don't even know if I'm going to go to an event. I might go to the student area. There's a watching area for the students. Maybe I'll go there, or I'll just go outside. I'll definitely go outside, and I have my little glasses ready to go, so we'll see. The thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is my new medication and what it has done to my psyche, so to speak. And that's why I am still debating making a separate video. Well, I think I will just say right now to go to the other video that I'm going to make about that, and I'll just give you the stuff in terms of how it's affected my reading. So I'm still getting used to it, the higher dosage specifically of the duloxetine. And I've done quite a bit of research. I even started, one of the sort of badder things that has happened in terms of time wasting is watching a lot of YouTube, and not all booktube, some booktube, but on the worst of it has been sort of true crime stuff, which has somewhat to do with the fact that in the fairy tale class, we're getting into the who's for dinner section, which is about who's for dinner, meaning who's going to be eaten. and so it does tie into our obsession with dark topics, and my kind of obsessive thing, especially with the YouTubes, is to fall into true crime stuff, and it is kind of fascinating, and there's a lot of interesting videos online, but it's also kind of like, why am I watching this? Why am I watching these terrible crime cases? Because it's just hard not to when you're into that stuff anyway, and I am. But it's not very educative. It's not what I should be doing with my spare time. But one of the little other rabbit holes is to find out more about how SNRI drugs work in terms of the serotonin, neoephedrine, the other stuff, the no stuff, the uptake inhibitors, reuptake inhibitors. So you have more of these two, whatever they are, hormones, chemicals in the in-between spaces between the synapses. Anyway, it's actually neuroscience stuff, and drugs it is fascinating, and I would like to read more about it and just get to understand it, because I'm pretty firmly pro-drug. I'm not anti, and I do think you need to be careful on all accounts. So whatever you say is just for you, and even if you're saying it to people, it's your one experience, and everyone needs to be aware of that. and I hope everyone is. And one thing I've noticed, and I'm already getting into what I'll talk about in the other video, is how people seem to be very down on duloxetine because of the fact that apparently you do have very, very strong withdrawal reactions. Like it's a drug withdrawal. You get sick when you stop taking it, especially if you don't taper, and you have to taper very carefully. And so a lot of people are angry at their doctors and just the world because they did not realize how sick the drug would make them feel. And anyway, I'll get into more of all this stuff in the other video where I will just talk about my experiences with duloxetine. I've been on it now for about a month, 3 weeks on the higher dose and then 1 week on the lower. So it's still kind of I'm still getting used to it. And so in terms of my reading, let's get into that. I'm doing quite well with Radetzky Marsh, and I wish I could go into more depth as to I feel like I'm a little bit too general when I say I'm liking it or not liking it, but that's part of that's why even like making this video I had to sort of work myself into wanting to make it, because I don't really have the wherewithal to do a deep dive. Let me try and gather my thoughts a little bit. On this one page I wrote wow, and there's a lot of like exclamation marks because the writing is so strong. And so when you hear people talk about Radetzky March, it's even called after this famous march by very jolly, what's the tune? I was listening to it the other day. Anyway, I'm not good at humming, but anyway, it's very sort of upbeat and jolly. It's Strauss. And so people just say it's the downfall of the Austro-Habsburg, Hungarian Habsburg Empire as depicted through the lives of certain men in one family, which is true. But that doesn't really give you that much. So okay, that's why is it so great then? And to me, of course, you know, people know my proclivities in terms of what I like to read. It's really very sort of, it's straddling, it was written in the 30s, and it's sort of straddling realism, so kind of the external stuff of the downfall, but it's also moving on into very not exactly stream of consciousness, but the writer or narrator, his voice is getting inside the people's heads in certain moments and describing their inability to respond in meaningful ways to their surroundings. And a lot is going on in their heads, and they're having a lot of thoughts. Like I'm just thinking of the one case where I wrote, wow, it's because the young person has just gotten terrible news, and he kind of goes onto this sort of riff of his own about, in a very poetic way, about what has happened. And I'm being vague for spoilery reasons, I guess, not wanting to give away too much of the plot, but maybe that's okay. And so it's a very sort of, the downfall of the whole world, as the whole society, is depicted in a kind of microscopic way as the inner difficulties that men are having, specifically the hero, but other men in his vicinity so far, with the world they find themselves in. Later on there's another plot point that hinges on a duel, and what's interesting is, so it's sort of looking back, it's not taking place in the 30s, I guess. It's everyone sort of realizes how stupid duels are and how ridiculous they are, and yet people, at the main person at the heart of it, he's someone who's very kind of disaffected with his own life because he wasn't able to do what he really wanted to do, and even his marriage isn't that happy, and he's a very sort of highly sensitive, reflective person, and yet because of external conditions he had to kind of pursue a military career. And it does hinge on the fact that these men are not really very enthusiastic about the military, but because of the way Austrian Hungary worked, it was like the only option almost, and so his whole life is a bit of a lie, or just he's not being able to be fulfilled because of having to be in the army. And so he kind of, the whole dual thing is the same thing. Like they go through there's a sort of passivity or a fatalistic aspect to, they just kind of resign themselves to these fates as opposed to running away or rebelling against them. And yet so that's one part. And then in these moments of passivity, there's also sort of a hint of it being heroic for some reason, and it connects to the beginning of the story, which I won't go into now, but like the only way to be heroic is to sort of, in a kind of ironic way, give up, or I don't know, I'm not exactly explaining it right, but so it's getting to sort of bigger, deeper issues, and it's all kind of connected to the weirdnesses of this what we say in German Vielvölkerstaat, this big conglomerate country that is being held together by the monarchies and sort of the military structure hierarchies, but it's sort of being hollowed out from the inside, and it's becoming obvious to people. I think that's the whole thing. So it's very, very good, very strong writing. What I might do is, I was glancing at the Goodreads quotes to find you some good quotes to give you an idea of it, and I want to make sure that I get quotes that I've already read, because I was looking at English quotes because this is German. And I've been watching a channel that I really like. She's a very sort of interesting, very different type of YouTuber, but good. Maria from Strange Lucidity, and she's very good at, even though she's German or Austrian, basically she's Austrian, it's interesting, she's very good about knowing about English translations of things, which I'm not good about. I just kind of like, oh, I'm reading it in German, who cares? So I do like, and I'm going to try and be better about that. For example, I think there might be a new NRYB translation of this, but I wouldn't be able to speak to how good it is, because that I haven't done that. I will try and get better at that, perhaps. Speaking of translated literature, my new audio, which I also have bought as a book, because that's why I do it, is amazing, and it's a classic. Sorry. It's Dostoevsky's The Idiot. And first of all, I wasn't really taken with the fact that this is a picture of Christ, but of course it does have a lot of bearing on the novel, if you know it. And it is actually from the picture that was just mentioned in the novel by Hans Holbein from 1521. Detail from Christ in the Tomb. So they've read the book, so it's fine that it's the cover. And I'm loving it so much. I don't know, well, I kind of do know why I stopped reading it, because when I read it first, it was, she had assigned it as extra reading for her class, and this is the she I'm talking about is Hélène Cixous, the French scholar who came to Northwestern, and I was one of the TAs back in the 90s. We weren't reading the whole thing. We were reading shorter texts by Lispector and Kleist and other people. But then this was sort of extra reading, and I was sort of telling her I hadn't read it yet, or that I admitted that I put it down. And she did this funny thing, sort of condescending, but it's okay, because she was Cixous, she's allowed to be condescending. Oh, you poor thing. She didn't say idiot. Maybe it was implied. You poor idiot, no. And the point was, you poor thing, because you have missed out. And I love that idea. And I kind of want to do that too with my kids. Like, I pity the people who don't find or take great pleasure in books like this. Like, oh, you poor thing, you've missed out on something so great. And she really meant it. It's just how she was. She was very much, what I do to this day really respect about it was how first primary literature book focused she was. She wasn't being all theory is everything. She's someone who wrote a dissertation on Joyce. I mean, she's very much connected to the primary text that then she kind of, in my opinion, creates her own primary texts about. Her work is sort of very blurred lines between theory and fiction. And so I do remember that. And then, so now finally I'm reading it and listening to it. It works quite well as an audio. It's a good narrator. I don't know who it is narrating. It's just an Audible. And I think it was actually a free Audible, like one that was already there, like for the Trollops. And so and since that's the first time I'm talking about this, and I'll come back to it, it won't be done, I'll probably be done, I don't know when, but so I don't have to be that in depth yet. But I'm really enjoying it. It's very sort of, it hinges on this guy, Prince Mushkin, who basically is a sort of Christ-like figure in the sense that he absorbs everyone's kind of like defenses or defensiveness or however they are, and responds with complete and utter honesty, kindness, understanding, and that's all we get from him. And his story, the fact that he's epilepsy and comes from Switzerland, so he's an outsider. but there isn't a lot of, there's no guile. He's completely guileless. He's completely sort of good is the thing. He's like a good person. That's like that's what the idiot is. He's a good person. And so the way people kind of respond to him and how he kind of doesn't have a lot of volition, he kind of seems to be drifting along. There's something sense that he's sort of after some women, although even there he's different too, because he has epilepsy, so he doesn't want to get married, because he doesn't have, he doesn't want to have a relationship. So, and that's fascinating to have a character like that, whose being is so, has nothing, doesn't want to gain or gain the upper hand in any kind of interaction with people, whereas everyone around him does. Everyone has some kind of agenda, and all these people that he interacts with and finds out about, and the placing's really good. The writing's strong. It's a translation by Alan Myers, a new translation, and I'm reading it. I like it. Or listening to it. Actually, that's actually an interesting point. I'm reading this, and then I noticed the translation on the audio is different. So it's a little bit of it's kind of, what's good about that in terms of reading translation is how you kind of are aware you're reading a translation. And so it kind of reminds you of the fact that you're getting it through these, their attempts to get what the Russian was saying are a little bit different. And that's kind of interesting. It's not bad. And it's not that different, so it's fine. So it's fantastic. Have you read The Idiot? How do you feel about Dostoevsky? I read or listened to, and actually mainly listened to Crime and Punishment, and really, really enjoyed it. I kind of want to go back and maybe read along more. And then a long time ago, even before Sixu in Germany, I read Brothers Karamazov, and I was thinking how it would be cool to learn Russian. Those were the days. And I did enjoy Brothers Karamazov. Knowing me, it probably took me a long time to read it, but I did enjoy it. I mean, he's really good with the kind of way he depicts people's foibles and all that good stuff. It's just amazing. I'm trying to think of what else to say. And a funny, if somewhat silly analogy is, he does this thing that Zola does a little bit, and actually Balzac was different. So this setup of how to get a lot of pages written is you place a lot of people in a room, like coming and going. People are in a room talking, and then there's a knock at the door, and then the other people come in, and the doorbell rings, and even like the doorbell stuff is sort of interesting too, and so this sense of a room getting more crowded with people. And I'll see if I can find a clip, I always think of the famous Marx Brothers scene on the boat where people keep coming in, and it's this tiny little room in a boat, and there's so many people in there, and someone's trying to clean it. It's just hilarious. And I do get a sense of very crowded rooms with a lot of people going, like having interactions, and they're not always connected. It's just a little bit like that. I mean, that's just a silly analogy, but... And then, since I had a tiny bit of time, I went a little bit back to Nupiming, which I'm still enjoying, and it's going well, but it's slow. And then today, I was sort of thinking of what another bad thing that happens, or kind of the contrariness of the fact that I have, again, less time to read, pushes me to want to read even more difficult things, which won't really happen. But I don't know if it's even difficult, but I did pick up this nice edition that I bought a while ago of I think Stoicism might be good for me. I've always thought that, and I've been told by people that I should be more stoic, because I ain't. But I do like this copy of the Meditations that I got, because someone said it was the best one, and I did kind of start reading it, and it was interesting, just a tiny bit from the second notebook, and he talks about the command center. This thing that I am, whatever we call it, is flesh, spirit, and the command center. And then the footnote, they say that they're materialists, and that even our souls are made of air, a physical substance, as is the command center, because it is part of the soul. But apparently they thought the command center was in the heart. So, okay. But then I found this stuff online, because, you always find cool stuff online that gives me the Greek of command center, which is hegemonikon is the command center, a military metaphor. He says that we use our mental command center to receive all the messages of life and send out our own messages to ourselves. Okay, that's really interesting. Even the military metaphor is interesting, giving me thoughts. Yes. And So I think I'm going to maybe continue with this. There's another book that I'm sort of a beginner with Stoicism, and I have a feeling it's one of those very boy clubby areas of philosophy where if you don't show your credentials as knowing what they're talking about, they can get kind of mean. I don't know. Maybe it's wrong, but there's a sort of one-upmanship, and you're not being a Stoic, and I'm being the better Stoic, and so silly, whatever. But what was I going to say? Oh yeah, there's another book that I might get called this Daily Stoic. It has little kind of snippets for every day. But I do think there's a basic sort of as a calming the mind and making sure that you don't spend too much time watching stupid YouTube videos way of like guidance. It might be good for someone like me. I might respond well to it, because I just think I might. So there's that. And then last but definitely not least, my tome that will ever be with me, and that this booktube person, I forget his name. Oh gosh, I was just reading. Anyway, someone was saying that I had introduced them to Margaret Young. So Miss Mackintosh, My Darling, which is a once in a lifetime thing to be read, because it's so hard to describe what's going on. And I just reached chapter 9, which is just this far of this much text. And it's been on my Goodreads for years now already. And I don't care. I really don't care that much. Let me just read you. So it's hard. I will just read you like the opening paragraph of chapter 9 to give you a sense of her prose. So this is one of the main characters speaking via a cartwheel, and she says, "What terrible deed was this which I had done, and which I never should forget, not until all the seas are emptied, until the waves fall away from the sea, not even then. What dreadful crime had been committed, that all my life I should be pursued by this vain remorse, this dark possibility that I, even as a little child, had killed Miss Mackintosh, that I had done so only perhaps by opening my eyes, that my eyelids remained sealed, she might have lived, and might to this day be seen again with her black umbrella lifted, there where waded in the milky fog the sandpipers timing themselves to the tide, the seagulls moon-breasted, the nestless shorebirds long-limbed, taller when they craned their necks and spread their wings. Who killed her? She who nursed beneath her shawl against the coldness of her breast, the seagull with its wounded leg, taking her constitutional with this companion though many days, I think it might be through many days. Who killed my darling? And the seagull died when its wound was healed." Ah, amazing. The back and forth of being alive and dead, and fantastic. A lot of birds. I mean, she's obsessed with birds. And she's also very good, this sort of mythological ramblings of setting the scene. Like, you do get this sort of seagull, seaside feel for what she's doing. And then there's other, of course, that's just one little snippet. And so this is her kind of thinking about Miss Mackintosh. She's been on the bus for a long time, and the bus driver is amazing too. He just had some amazing things to say too. So it's just very, very soothing to read. And someone was saying, I read an article somewhere, and it kind of makes sense to me of a certain sort, that this work, it was a LitHub article about it that I'll see if I can find for you guys. It reminded them of Henry Darge's world, on the realms where the comic, the sort of outsider art, Vivian Girls, and because that novel that he wrote, it's connected to the pictures, the scrolls of all the different interactions in the novel, and the Vivian Girls, and the bad people and the good people, and the one with the wings. I'm obsessed. That's very long too, and it sort of has its own momentum. And of course, he's a very sad person in the sense he was very isolated. She was kind of happy, lived a happy bohemian life in her apartment with her dolls, from what one can gather. And so, yeah, this sort of very closed off aspect to it, that it's its own thing, and that it's its own universe, and that's okay. I've rambled for 25 minutes almost. I apologize, but this is kind of where I'm at. And I think if it seems a little bit disjointed, it's because of the other video that'll come along. And then maybe in that one I'll talk a little bit about how I see how what's happening with me might change the channel a little bit. I'm not sure. I mean, I'll still have a channel, don't worry, but I might change a few things about how I film. But we'll see, maybe not. Maybe I'll just keep doing what this seems to be going okay. And I know I still need to do one more video with all the other questions that weren't really answered, and that might actually turn into a series. Like the question about German versus Austrian, that's probably a whole video. Zola update is a whole video, and then Trollope could be a whole video. So and then whatever else I'll see on the questions, I'll make them too. Thanks to everyone who's watching, and I hope this wasn't too boring. And yes, the other one will come, that'll be purely about my experiences on this new drug, which for the most part have been positive, but we'll see. Talk to you soon. Thanks all for watching. Bye.